everyone, and welcome. This is Take the Lead, Change the Game, a podcast for women leaders looking to deepen their knowledge and skills and find enjoyment in the process. We're powered by Safra Leadership. Safra Leadership is a cohort-based coaching experience designed to fuel courage and ignite impact among women professionals. I'm Lindsay Goldford Gray, and I'm here with my co-host, Mindy Gulati. We are the co-founders of Safra. Together, we bring a blend of leadership coaching, strategy, and lived experience to help women navigate challenges, seize opportunities, and lead with confidence.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, everyone. And we're so excited because we have a guest today. And this guest happens to be one of my favorite people in the whole world. And so you get to meet a person who's near and dear to me and who's also a tremendous leader in her organization and community. So excited to share a little bit about Muna. So as I introduce her, I want to tell you a little bit about her to get you so you can have a perspective before we dive into some questions with her. Muna has worked in tech for over 20 years and is really passionate about getting things done, doing things right, and having fun in the process, which I have seen firsthand, so I can attest to that. The majority of her career spans working at large tech organizations, supporting enterprise efforts. And a lot of her core competencies are around program management, operational excellence, agile leadership, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Muna has a track record of delivering results that change with a contagious and positive attitude, which I'm sure you'll find today. She demonstrates a lot of courage in her leadership, and I would say courage in the rest of her life as well. Muna is really proud of, and I'm always proud to talk about launching of a program at PayPal called Recharge. Recharge was a program designed to help technologists who have taken a career break return to work. That's one of the first entries I had to Muna, was getting to know her through the Recharge program at PayPal. And it was really amazing work that she put into it. So excited to be here with her today and learn a lot about her. So hi, Muna, how are you?
Hey, Mindy, you know, in prepping for this, I was thinking about when I first started working, I felt like such a kid. I remember I would go to meetings and everybody would be at the, conference room back when everyone had to go into the office and there were no video calls. And everyone would come, they'd have their newspapers and their coffee mugs. And I'd come into the meeting with like my chocolate milk.
Yeah.
And, most of the folks on my team had been on my team longer than I was alive.
Yeah.
And, the industry and the landscape of work has changed so much since then, because I was literally the only 20-something in that room. So it's interesting to think about how far I've come and how much things have changed in the last, I think I've been working almost 25 years.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're excited to hear today about your career journey. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey over, say, the last 10 years or however long you'd like to share, how you view your role as a leader, how you got into leadership. Just give us a little bit of a view into your journey.
I will say, I think my career journey has been a little bit different. There's, those people out there who know exactly what they want to do and they go do it. Not me. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I was good at. And to be honest, I'm not even sure how I still landed my first job. I think someone who was looking at resumes saw something they liked, and then I showed up with, a couple brain cells in the interview. But I've always been enthusiastic about what I was doing. And, my mom and my dad, but mostly my mom raised me to do things with pride. She'd always say, don't just get it done, do it right. And, Mindy, you kind of read that in my intro where she's like, finish the job and finish it well. Like, you should be proud of it. And so I think that work ethic served me well, where it didn't matter what I was working on. Like, I'd want to get it done right. And then, just being friendly and talking to people in the office, like, I would realize we'd be having meetings and then what people would be saying in the hallway was different. And I'd be confused. I'm like, why didn't you bring that up in the meeting? Well, you can't. I'd be like, why not? And I don't know if it was the naivety of just being young or, being someone who is generally optimistic. I'd be like, well, I'll bring it up in the next meeting. And what I didn't realize at the time was that it created trust. People were like, oh, she might be, 21, but she's listening. And then I would push and I wouldn't take no not to say I was being, really pushy or assertive, but I wouldn't take no for an answer because I didn't understand. Well, why not? Well, why not? And then slowly things would start to change because I didn't accept something I didn't understand. Why am I explaining this? Because over time, I think I built a brand for listening, for being able to say what was real, and for driving for change that people actually needed. And it built a respect for my work. And what happened over time was I started getting pulled. Well, I want Muna to come work on this. I want Muna to come work on this. And I slowly started getting pulled into, like, if you have a project and you care about it and you want someone to lead it that you can trust, like, I would start having leaders pull me onto things because they liked how I worked. And so I didn't necessarily carve a path for myself, but people pulled me. It was stuff that was important. It was stuff that they cared about. And I think I got spoiled over time because I ended up working on things that were already important, that had resourcing made available to it because it was important. People were already like supporting and sponsoring the efforts. And then I didn't have to deal with as much friction, if you will. And so it's something I realized over time, but it's something I've also been lucky because people would pull me to work on their efforts that were important to them. And they were already successful and they could see something in me. And so my career evolved over time based on other people pulling me, not because I was architecting where I wanted to go. With that said, kind of transitioning to my career over time, I worked at PayPal for 10 years. And I'll be honest, I was very comfortable there. I had a good brand. People liked me. My career was moving and shaking. This was prior to COVID, though. And so I kind of stalled out at a director level or senior manager level because at that time, you had to move to headquarters to move up. The concept of remote work hadn't quite evolved. And with that said, I just want to point out that most of my career, I had worked remotely. I'd always been in Austin, and I'd always worked with Silicon Valley companies that were headquartered somewhere else. And it is an art, along with being a science, to work remotely and lead stuff remotely when everybody else is in a different location. And so this opportunity presented itself to interview for a role at Indeed. And I was sort of taken aback in the sense that, wait, I'd get to be in leadership and I'd be at headquarters and I'd be in person. Like, it was a risk for me to take because I was very comfortable in my career with moving at PayPal. And I was like, I'm just going to throw all of that away and go work with a bunch of people I don't know. And I thought, you know what? If I don't do this now, when am I going to do it? Right. And so I made that jump. And it was definitely for me a risky move in the sense that I went to a company where I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the culture. I didn't have any history or background. And, when I made the move after being at a place for 10 years, you don't realize that what you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah.
And so, making that shift was a huge learning experience for me. And then, of course, after I left Indeed and I went to the company that I was most recently at, what I learned really helped me to be successful because I then had some experience about knowing what I needed to be successful. And so I know I've done a whole lot of talking there. I'll pause and see if y'all have any questions.
Yeah, no, that's so fascinating. And I love how you talk about how comfortable you were at PayPal and not everyone knew you, but like many people knew you and you had sort of your own brand. And then you moved into where it was like, oh, nobody knows me. And so I've got to figure out what I don't know and also like build my own self back up, in terms of my identity. I'd love to hear more about sort of the career transitions that you've had, both those when you've gone sort of directly from one company to another, but then also periods where you've had a break, if there are any, and sort of what sort of work you did during that time and like how that shaped you as a leader.
So I'm going to start by talking about my first break, which isn't a break. I was on maternity leave when my first daughter was born, and I was supposed to come back to work and I was let go. It was one of the first times that IBM did a layoff. Granted, it was huge, but they'd never let go of people on maternity leave. It just wasn't a thing at that time. And I always look back at that time, and at the time, it was probably the worst time in my life. Like, I had a baby. I got let go of work. I lost my insurance. Then I was diagnosed with cancer. I mean, it was just like boom, 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 boom. I was like, how bad can this get? But then I look back on it now and I realize because I was laid off and I had time, I went to a doctor and my cancer was diagnosed. Because I was sick. And, granted, I had to go through treatment and whatnot, but I was at home with my child for 18 months, almost 2 years, and I would have been working that whole time. And it sounds so dumb to say, but you don't get that time back. They're little for all of like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was able to spend that time with her when she was little. Granted, I was sick, but, I would have been working otherwise. And then I ended up finding a job where I significantly increased my salary. And so I share the story not to be like, oh, everything's going to be okay. It's just that like, yes, change is hard, but you just put one foot in front of the other. You take things one day at a time and you work things out. I think I heard a quote recently and it's been resonating for me a lot. The bird doesn't sit on the tree branch because it trusts the tree. The bird trusts itself. It trusts its wings, right? So it's like believing in yourself and that you're capable of taking care of things and, just like working through and asking for help when you need it or praying when you need it, right? So that's kind of first transition, I'll say. Second transition I'll talk about was between Indeed and working at Cornerstone, where I left Indeed. I will say that, so some of my learnings, right? Indeed is a technologist company. They build teams that are really small so that they can work really fast and not have dependencies. And each team is very independent, which is great when you're an engineer. But when you're trying to do enterprise planning, there's certain underpinnings that are requirements for enterprise anything to work, which is that all teams work in a standard way, that they're standard processes. And so what I will say is after, some time, I'm able to say this, but like the culture wasn't a fit for me because for what I do at enterprise level planning or enterprise level, being a chief of staff of an organization, when every team, some teams plan weekly, some people do Kanban, which is daily. Some people are working in 2-month increments. If you can't standardize how people are planning and what the output is, my job was impossible. And I, at the time, took that as a personal failure. And it was really hard for me because I've never felt that big a failure of like, why can't I do things here? Why can't I feel successful? And so I left that company and I took a couple months off, and I, at that time, felt like I had made such a personal failure of being unable to do the things I wanted to do. And I started therapy, actually, because I felt like I was generally a failure in life where, if you looked at my life on paper, it looked damn good. And what I realized was, I'm Indian. I'm the oldest daughter in my family. My parents were immigrants. I was born and raised here. And granted, my parents are great. They did the best they could, but they really wrapped me up into a very tight ball that served them, right? Like I wasn't allowed to say no from a very young age. I wasn't allowed to hold any boundaries or have any, it didn't matter what my parents said. I always had to say, okay. And I told myself this story, and granted, I'm very good natured as it is, but told myself a story that I'm not selfish. Well, it's to make myself feel better that I was never allowed to say no, even when things were really unfair. I remember, and I could tell many stories, but it's kind of the quintessential, it's Thanksgiving and the boys are watching football. And I was in the kitchen with my mom, all day, cooking. And then the football game's over and then the guys come in to eat. And then I wasn't allowed. I like football. I'm a huge sports buff. I wasn't watching the game. And then I wanted to go finish watching the game. And then I ended up in the kitchen doing dishes. And I remember just losing it and picking the biggest fight with my brother who's older than me. And I'll say that I've had a black belt in karate since I was 12. And, you can fill in some of the dots, but I did not let go that he didn't come help me. And that, granted, I was so angry at my brother, but when I look back at it, it's the environment my parents set up. But with that said, I how, like, I've always been successful in work because I was working on someone else's behalf, somebody else's project, someone else's staff. I'm really good as someone's right hand. But when I'm the one holding the line, when I have to hold somebody accountable, I couldn't do it for myself.
Mm.
So how am I supposed to do that for someone else? And so, I always thought therapy is something for people who have really gone through like horrible stuff, like they've lived through war or they've been sexually abused or something. I had a pretty benign childhood, like, that Thanksgiving story I told.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Everybody's environment affects them in different ways. Different things will hurt you. Different things will tie you up. Different things will give you trauma. And I cannot recommend enough people going to therapy because it took me a while, but I went through a lot of discovery around myself, and I can't say that I'm necessarily like happy because I don't know that the point of life is to be happy, but I am learning about myself and I'm content, and it helped me. And so coming back to what does that mean for work? When I went through this period of upheaval and feeling like a failure, and I took my second job after that, second, first, whatever, you're keeping up with me, right? And so after that break, when I took my next job, what I knew to be important was that I needed to be in an environment where I felt like I could really stretch my legs and run. And so I wanted to be somewhere where I understood the culture, where it was a fit. But the second piece I'll say was that I needed a boss who was going to be supportive of me, where I had trust, where I knew what I was doing would make sense to not only the leadership, but would work in the culture I was in. And that was an important ingredient for me. And so it's not to say I can't take risks, but at that season in my life, I needed safety. I took a job with someone I had worked with 10 years ago. And I cannot tell you how freeing it was to go into that job with automatic trust and safety, to be able to like make decisions that weren't just completely questioned all of the time. And to know that not only was my judgment trusted, but that if I made decisions or I took risks, that I had a safety net. And it really helped me in being successful, because then I was able to take risks knowing that it wasn't me being questioned, that like my credibility was going to give me some cushion. So, okay, I know a lot of talking again. Let me
I love it. This is great. I'm going to ask like just give me your quick thoughts on, when people are, what we hear in coaching, and I'm sure Lindsay, you probably heard this too, Muna, just in your network. It's like when people are looking for a new job, I think people can sometimes feel like they can't ask for what they really want. Like they're nervous to interview the company. And it sounds like with this last place you've been, you really were looking for a place you were going to fit, and that would give you that runway. What did you ask? I know you were working with someone you knew, but like, what are some questions people should ask when they're looking for a place that's going to be good for them when that's somewhat unpredictable?
Yeah. I'm going to start by telling a story, and then I'm going to answer your question. When I started working at PayPal, my husband's grandmother was in hospice. We did not know how long she had. And I was scared to ask, can I take some time? Or, like I said, headquarters was in San Jose and you were expected to be out there. And I had just started and I felt so uncomfortable saying, can I just come out next week or the week after? We don't know when she's going to pass away. Couple that with the fact that I had a little baby, I was nursing, and I didn't want to quit nursing because, when you travel, when you've been nursing, if you start pumping at 18 months, like you don't have any supply. And so my husband, who, has supported me, I give him a lot of credit. He brought the baby, he took time off from work, traveled out to San Jose with me. And he was like, just go do your job. Right. And I'll bring the baby to you. And if something happens to my grandmother, we'll fly back. His grandmother ended up passing away. We couldn't make it back on time. My husband, I was like, you go take the flight. I'll keep the baby. He's like, what are you going to do at work with the baby? And I'm, he was like, nope, we're not leaving you. I'm not going to make you like carry the baby and the pack and play and the stroller and everything by yourself and try to figure it out. You haven't even been to San Jose before. We missed his grandmother's funeral. Muslims do burials within 24 hours. And it's something that like, it makes me like, my husband was so there for me, and I hate that he paid that cost of like missing, like his grandmother raised him. And when I told my colleagues, they were like, Muna, why didn't you just ask? We have families too. We understand. And I remember being like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I was so afraid to ask. I didn't know what I would lose or whatever, right? And this was after I'd gotten the job. It wasn't even in the interview process.
Yeah.
I call that out to say sometimes our fears, like we get in our own way, right? With that said, during the interview process, because of the experience I went through and the culture being so different at Indeed, I asked about, and it was a question mostly to leaders, not to peers, right? Where it's like, what do you need from your people for them to be successful? What do you expect, right? Because one of the things that in the type of role I am, like I do strategy and planning. Usually it's on behalf of a different leader, right? So it's like, what sponsorship are you going to give me? Now, that's not necessarily the question I asked, but in the true style of interviewing, right? Like the STAR method, situation, task, action, result. And if you were to do it again, what would you learn differently? If you're not familiar with that methodology, I suggest you Google it. But, I asked, I said, well, in these type of situations, right? Like, how have you supported your people? And like, I wanted them to give me like examples. Because if you can't articulate that, or like, what do you do when you disagree with somebody on your staff, right? Are they able to disagree with you? Are they allowed to have a different, like, how do you handle conflict?
Yeah.
What have you done? Like, tell me about a time when you were wrong and your staff was right. What did you do, right? Like, I want to hear not only how they answer, but their hesitation in answering, right? Because if they don't have a comfort in admitting when they're wrong, or they don't have a comfort in admitting that they can learn, then they're not going to be able to do that with you either.
Yeah.
Because while I'm very good at what I do, I was raised in a way where forget arguing. Like I still don't even make like disrespectful eye contact with my parents. And so it's not to say that I'm uncomfortable with conflict, but I would like to be able to disagree and then feel that the other person is sincere in like responding to me versus just playing games. Or that I have to like show up and bang on a table and scream and yell and cuss, because that's not who I am and it's not my culture. And I've worked at places like that. But like, can we disagree on things and it be civil?
Yeah.
And so you have to know who you are and what you need to be successful in order to advocate for that, right? Like there's leaders I've worked for who are so soft-spoken, never yelled, never cursed, like forget even arguments. Like they don't raise their voice even in like, and that's we're not told that that's leadership. You have to show up strong. You have to have your voice heard, right? And like, you don't have to compromise yourself to be successful. You just have to know how to work in a frame that you're comfortable in, and that the frame, like, I'm not going to say accommodate, because other people aren't always going to be nice to you, right? But that you don't have to compromise yourself in that frame, right? And you have to know sort of what you need to make that happen.
Yeah.
I love that, because I think it's really important to have that awareness of yourself, and it takes time. So people who are listening, who maybe this is the first time you thought about it, it's fine, because not all of us are aware in the beginning of our careers. As we get older, we do start to see like, oh, this is what I need. And so I love that, these examples, I think they're really clear to help people as they move into another role. Lindsay, do you have a question for Muna?
Yeah, I think, one question that I really love to ask, because you've talked about a number of things, but if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would you tell her? I know it's so hard, but I love it.
I would tell her to trust herself. That story I was telling about like the hallway conversation being different than the conversation in the meeting. And I'll give a very simple example, and I think it affects all of us now. Like you're in a meeting and someone says something, you don't quite understand what they said. Why don't we just ask, what did you mean by that? What does that mean? I think a lot of times I felt insecure or afraid, or maybe I didn't know, or maybe everyone else understands and I don't. And I really quickly realized that the conversation I'm having with myself in my head needs to be the same voice that comes out. Maybe it needs to be a little filtered, right? A little bit of snap. Keep it professional, whatever. But with that said, to speak as plainly as possible. And I'll leave you with one story. I was in a meeting with a whole bunch of like we won't name the company, but the CTO, a whole bunch of senior vice presidents of engineering. And again, because I'm trusted, I got pulled to work on this huge problem, right? Like the company was having all these outages. Every time we'll call it application went down, they're losing a lot of money every minute. Mm-hmm. And I was brought in to help manage this, we'll call it a crisis. There's a concept in tech called P0 when there's a problem, a priority zero. That's basically everything is going to hell in a handbasket, all hands on deck, like hair on fire. And if you've worked in tech and in engineering and support for a long time, this is a term that everybody knows. Mm-hmm. I hadn't worked in software engineering at that time. I didn't know this terminology. And so I'm sitting, and I'm, by the way, only woman in the room, only brown person in the room, youngest person in the room, all these really senior accomplished people. And, I kind of like, they were talking about this P0 and I was like, well, what is that? And I will tell you like the audible groans in the room of like, who invited this person here? She doesn't know what she's talking about. The CTO, who was the most senior person in the room, paused the meeting and he explained it to me. And then when he explained what it was, I felt like such a dum-dum. Then he stopped and he looked around at everyone in the room and he said, we can only move as fast as the slowest person in here. So it's my job to make sure that you understand, because you're not dumb. You're coming up to speed and we need you to know everything so that you can do your best work. So how else can I help you? And I realized at that point, he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to everyone else in the room, because he did not appreciate their reaction to my question. And he stopped and he said, every question from every person at any point in time is welcome. And I will stop any meeting to answer it, because your time and your ability to do your best work is going to help all of us be successful. And I was like, woo, like I was like trying to like hold in tears at that point, but I was so grateful to him. And he gave me that trust, and he, he trusted me because of, I guess it's like transference, right? Someone else had told him that I was good. And so he trusted me. He gave me that care. But you know what? My feeling is he gives everybody that care. And he has built a culture of safety and trust. And going back to that first story I told around like the hallway conversation being different, like that's kind of our job as leaders, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do we make the jobs for the people who work for us easier? How do we make it so they can focus on their job and not the process sucking or people conflicts sucking or, like politics having to be left at the door. So when, because like we come to work as our whole self. And if I'm a good leader, I have showed up for my people so that they can do their best work and they want to come back every day because they are like happy to be able to do their best work, right? Like I can't promise that people around me are going to be happy, but they are going to be taken care of, damn it. And that starts with like trusting yourself to be able to show up and do your best work.
Yeah. Awesome, Muna. We need an entire hour with you.
I know.
Learning so much.
I kept like telling stories.
No, I love it. I love it. We know that stories are the best way for people to learn. So we are at time. So I'd love to, if anybody has questions for Muna, you can put them in our chat on socials. She'll get back to you. We'll make sure she answers any questions, or we do. But I really appreciate you, Muna, and this, you are someone I admire. You're a leader that I think is authentic, true to who they are. Leaders would be well served learning from you. So always appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Muna. It was great having you.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. And I look forward. I listen to all the software leadership podcasts, and I'm going to catch them all going forward.
Awesome. Oh, fun. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.